Okay, everybody, welcome to the Roundtable, which we're going to rename. Well, we're just kind of filling in. I know that Mitchell and Merrill are taking some time off. You know, it's in between seasons. And so Malpal and I are going to talk baseball. I mean, we talk baseball anyways. This is like a phone call or text messages back and forth that we constantly have about baseball. So thanks for joining me, Malpal. And
You bet.
how are you, dude?
Doing good. Kind of cold and cloudy out here, but we will do. A bad day here is like 60 degrees.
Okay, first of all, you know nothing about cold.
I
Okay,
don't I don't know anything.
you know nothing.
I got my
So,
Lenny Melnick sweater on, but
oh,
I am wearing shorts. So
that's actually the Lady and the Legend
the
sweatshirt.
lady and the legend. I'm
Let's
sorry.
not get away with ourselves here. I'm in that too. You got that for winning a league that we had last year, 2020. So you came in first place. You tied, so I had to buy two of
Uh-oh.
those. But anyway, whatever. So we're happy to do that. It's really fun. Today we're going to talk about, of course, we got to go over the World Series just a little bit. I mean, I think that, well, I don't think I've even asked you who you're rooting for, but I'm obviously rooting for Atlanta.
Yeah, that's obvious. I'm kind of indifferent because I know Atlanta or Houston is popular to hate these days, right? So I'm always a contrarian. I always kind of like to go against the mob, and the mob is clearly for Atlanta. But I don't really like Houston, and I don't really dislike Atlanta. So I'm kind of just watching it. It's actually interesting
Wait,
just to observe.
wait, you said that you like to go against the what?
The herd,
The herd. And who's the herd rooting for, Atlanta?
Atlanta, because everyone hates Houston, unless you're from Texas or you know. But majority of the people are bitter still from 2016, right?
It's
Or
2017, and
17.
I'm pretty sure it lasted through 2018 too, but we'll give them a break. Everybody was doing it, but I am a little bitter. I agree, even though I know. So like I have this, what's it called when you have that? Um, there's a term for it where your morals are like, you know that every team in baseball was cheating, but you're annoyed only at the Houston Astros that got caught. So that doesn't make a lot of sense, right? I mean, if you're going to be mad at a team, you should be mad at all the teams. We know the Red Sox were cheating. We know the Yankees were cheating. We pretty much know like any team that was supposedly like ahead of the curve on analytics, right? The
Right.
team,
And all the Boston fans, but their manager was the guy who kind of orchestrated the whole thing,
yeah,
all
started it
reports.
all. The king of cheating.
Right.
I was not mad at the Red Sox, so I guess that's a, that really contradicting myself. But so, do you think that yesterday? So because Atlanta had an opportunity to win the World Series yesterday, fair and square, and be done with it, and they didn't do that. And it would have been so nice for them to do it at home, where they got the All-Star game, stolen from them at home. Like, what better revenge than that for the fans, especially, and the people of Atlanta who got totally screwed, but for no reason of their own. Anyway, moving on from that, the fact that they're going back to Houston is not, in my opinion, going to fare well for the Braves team.
Yeah, except, I mean, Houston now is seemingly in a situation that the Braves were in last night, and that they kind of run out of starting pitching all of a sudden, right?
Well, is it all of a sudden? I mean, these guys have dealt with so many injuries. It seems like both teams are really low on pitching. But
But
I
I'm
was
talking
going to,
about in this series, the lack of pitching and injuries has caught up to the Braves for two games because of this days, not no days off or anything. So they had to kind of work their way through two starts, and now they get freed back tomorrow. Houston hasn't really had to do that yet until like now. So it's going to be interesting. I don't know. I don't think they have a starter name, do they?
the Houston bullpen has been worked like dogs, though. I mean,
Yeah.
I know just before even yesterday's game, they had been worked like 60 innings or something. But both teams really do have a shortage for whatever reason. I mean, there's injuries. Charlie Morton got hurt. I mean, on both teams, there's a list of injuries. So you have Tucker Davidson last night, who pitched and wasn't even on the postseason roster until game 2, right? When
Yeah,
somebody else got hurt.
that was kind of ugly, wasn't it?
I don't know if it was that ugly. Was it that ugly? Because it seems to me that Adam Duvall, dude, took care of business in the first inning. He got a grand slam. So it's like the Braves had the edge at that point. I don't know how deep Tucker Davidson went into the game, but I should really pull up those stats just to check it out. I just wonder if like pinning it on Tucker Davidson is fair, is like the right thing to do. Obviously, it's a team sport, but could they have used a more experienced pitcher in that situation?
Sure. But I think I made a comment in the chat room this morning is I think that goes to show that these two teams will never be disguised for one of the greatest teams of all time. I mean, these guys they're equal teams, but they're not great teams because the pitching is just so diluted. They don't have, neither team really has a true ace. I know Morton and Fried have good years, but are they really like dominant aces? They can be, but you don't think, when you think of the top pitchers in baseball, they're not one of them. Neither one of them are. And the Astros they lost their best pitcher. So
Mccullars?
It's a great series, but it's kind of meh. I don't think it's great baseball.
Why didn't they use Tyler Matzik last night? I just wonder, like, when they actually put Drew Smiley in for the final 3 innings, and he allowed 2 more runs, which it didn't really matter at that point, but kinda. I mean, the score was 9-5 at the end, but Framber Valdez, somebody we were talking about before the show started, we were both commenting, because here's the rundown for tonight. We're going to talk about the fact that the Steamer Fantasy Baseball projections came out already for 2022. We will take a quick gander at those a little bit. Malpal told me about a formula that he uses, and I think this was right when the Baseball Roundtable started. He said, he mentioned on one of those roundtables that if you add up the ground ball rate of a pitcher with the strikeout percentage of a pitcher and it equals 70, then it can help you determine potential breakout players for next year. And we're always looking for projections into next season. What's a reliable projection? We've talked about that formula a lot since that day and have come up with well, we know, it's constantly changing. He hasn't perfected it yet, but the basics of it, which makes it very easy for anybody to look up, is that if those two numbers add up to 70, you have a potential breakout. Now, Malpal, you can explain it further. I will say that since then we've messed around with adding walks and home runs allowed, because it seems that sometimes these pitchers that do reach that 70 mark, in fact, sometimes reach like 80 or 85, they are not great because they walk so many batters. And you can really see that in some pitchers. But Framber Valdez jumps off the page, especially because he had the highest ground ball rate in baseball last year, 70%. I've never seen a ground ball rate that high. So far in the series, like the postseason, he's got a 19 ERA or something crazy like that. He hasn't been good. So even though Davidson did not do well, Valdez did not do well either. Both of these teams scored 4 runs in the first 3 innings. So then you think about where the game was lost, and it has to be said that the game was lost from the 5th inning on because the Braves didn't score at all and they gave up runs. So go ahead and tell about unless you want to talk more about the World Series, but I'm sure that drum has been banged. But
yeah, I have no way, predicting this World Series. Anyone who thinks they know what's going to happen is just.
I'm rooting for Atlanta.
Right, you can root, but predicting this thing they're even teams. They both got the same weaknesses and same strengths.
They do. They really do. I think they're both as good as each other, and it's just going to depend on which team shows up that day, or maybe
Right.
So I had this MLB, I had this dress, a Houston Astros dress from the 1986 All-Star game, and it's from Cooperstown, just a jersey dress that buttons up the front. And I just, I sell stuff on eBay, and so I thought this would be a perfect time to sell this dress right before the World Series. The Astros are going, and so I shipped that dress off today, and I hope that it gets to the girl in time, and she's in Houston, so that's pretty fun that
So it did sell, huh? That's cool.
It sold, and I was so stupid, and I feel bad about it because I should have known to make it a 5-day auction instead of a 7-day auction, because we were already in the world. Like, we were already there. We already knew that the Astros were going, and I listed it that day, and I was like, I should have listed it for only 5 days, but I put it on full 7 days. That was so stupid, because then we hit the weekend, and so now I couldn't send it to this lady till Monday. Anyway, I told her I'm sending it out today. I hope she gets it. I think it's great, because here I am printing the postage, and it's a girl in Houston. Like, what better person to get the dress,
Right.
So we'll talk a little bit about the fact that you've been using this formula for longer than I don't know how much longer you were using it before you
a while, probably 4 or 5 years.
Okay, 4 or 5 years you've been using this. Now, he says, I'm sure other people are using this, and maybe they are, but there is no specific formula for this. There's no ground ball plus strikeout percentage. you hear people in fantasy talk about the ground ball percentage. You hear people in fantasy talking about the strikeout percentage, of course, but you never hear these two formulas put together, and that's really it. And so he said to me earlier, I don't know if it works over a long period of time, but are you sure you've been using it for that long? You're still using it. And I went back just to grab the numbers since 2019, and I could tell you that since 2019, it's been pretty good at projecting breakout pitching.
I've had good luck with it, and kind of the genesis of this, many of us get these magazines that we think are more sophisticated than others, like HQ or whatever. And back in the day, I always wondered why they keep talking about ground ball rates. I'm just a fan. I watch games, and I played baseball, and I understood ground balls were better than deep fly balls. But what was the emphasis? Why do they keep talking about that? And I started thinking, it's like, ground. What doesn't go out of the baseball park?
What gets them out before they get a hit?
Right, ground balls and strikeouts aren't hit, and ground balls don't go over the fence. So, to me, that's a sign of you're going to have fewer big blow up games, which drives ERA over a period of time, right, over a season. And you're going to have fewer doubles, and you're going to have more opportunities at double plays. That was kind of why I started thinking about this. And I go, well, I'm going to go down this list that I had at the time and see where do these guys fit in with their ground ball and strikeout rates. And then I kind of noticed it was between, major leaguers are all between 55 on average, between 55 and 75 over a period of time. And the elites, started digging into it, they all kind of migrated 70 and above on average. And then the crappy pitchers were always down below 65 for sure. And some of them even down in, like I said, in the high 50s or 60. And then you look at the ERAs, and it's like, did I stumble across something? Is someone else doing this? So I started kind of doing it with my friend Joe D when we're having teams together. We'd sit there and we'd go through the available guys, and we'd write it out on a piece of paper, and we'd compare notes and say, how many of these guys were over 70%? Didn't get into the walks and stuff. And that's something that this year kind of started tinkering with. How do we tinker this? Why is a guy like Framber Valdez not like Max Scherzer?
Or right? Lance McCullars, dude. He's got
Right.
He's got a problem.
So I started looking at the walks, and then he started going, oh, now we're getting into total base runners. So that's why I'm saying it's a constant. I'm constantly toying with it, but it seems to have worked, especially in where I really put it to practice in this very competitive AL league that I'm in with 12 teams, and it's my Bible for that league.
So I don't know if you ever, this is the closest thing that comes to mind. In fact, I did not even think of this until right now, but we started talking about these stats. Ron Chandler came up with a thing called Pure Quality Start, and it was PQS. And in like 2010 or 2011, I remember he put in the Baseball Forecaster, he put in there that if you get your license plate in your state to PQS, and PQS was not available in New York, but I did get PQS 05. 5 is like the greatest. So the three stats that he looked at in a pure quality starts were walks, strikeouts, and ground ball. And so the math was a little bit different, and it took the last 5 starts of a pitcher where you would determine the chances of them having a complete blow up or from his perspective, the guy that was prone to having a blow up every now and then was better than the guy that was consistently average. So because his potential to have a great, a pure quality start to the max, like that was higher. So a lot of people, they try to go for the safe pitcher, but using these 3 stats, which is walks, strikeouts, and ground balls, is pretty much what we're doing now. I didn't even put it together, but that stat is not being used anymore. And I think one of the reasons why is because it's too much of a pain in the ass to go and find a pitcher's last 5 starts. And then you have to say, okay, your pitcher gets thrown out, dude, if he doesn't meet certain qualifications for each of these 3 things. And it's just a real time consuming. It's not easily looked at with this ground ball. With just looking at the ground ball and the strikeout percentage, it makes it really easy to pull into a spreadsheet or just look at like on the normal statistic page. So last year you won 2021. You came in first in your American League only. I know it went right down to the last hit of the game, right? It went down to the last day.
Yes.
Tell me about that. Nerve-wracking?
It was nerve-wracking. It was really the last 3 days. I had sunk like 10 points. My team just went on a strike, early September. And then when I made a miracle comeback the last week, mainly from Jose Ramirez, and then a bunch of relief pitchers just go crazy, and my starters kind of hung in there, which we could talk about. Guys like Rodon and Lynn all kind of came through in their last 2 starts.
Explain to me, why did you draft Rodon? I mean, I know we're talking about the last couple. I'm going to actually, while you talk, I'm going to pull up the ADP. And just to clarify, though, he was one of the last picks, if not the last pick. And these are the types that you would draft just Hail Mary,
Well, yeah, and this is an auction. It's a 260 league, but it goes to the same point. So, you get to the scrap, you get toward the end and you don't have much money. So at that point of the draft, you're not going to get, Garrett Cole, right? You're not going to get Mccullars or Ohtani or whoever. So that's when this really works, I think. And it's no guarantee, but in a guy like Rodon, this is what I was thinking. Okay, he's injured, right? We know, and it's a risk, and that's why he hasn't been taken yet, right?
He's been injured his whole life,
right?
Dude.
So when you're down to your last $10, I always go for upside, right? I don't want to be I don't want to be spending $5 on tip. I know he had a good year, but Cobb, or I don't want to be who's the other guy from the Angels? He was with the Orioles.
I totally know what you mean, though.
I don't
Because
want these guys. I don't want. You just name it, a Kansas City starter this year. I don't want these guys because I don't want Matt Boyd. And I call this in my mind, I remember talking to Jody, this is a Matt Boyd rule. I don't want him anymore for this reason. So a guy like Rodon, for instance, so I looked at him and his career ground ball rate is about 42%, more or less.
okay,
And the average is about 40 to 42, right? So, and he has a career strikeout rate of more or less 25, which is above the level that I look for, which is about 23, 24. So this guy has hit two metrics for me. And that's a sign that I use those two. You add those two together and you get 67%. That's getting pretty close, right, to 70. And by that time, you're not going to get any 70%ers,
right.
toward the end. And the one risk, there's two risks with Rodon. He's got a historically terrible injury history, and he's wild. He throws a lot of walks. So I'm not paying $25. I'm going to spend $25 on Rodon. I got him for $3, and I was ecstatic because I got a guy who has a.
You'd be ecstatic, dude. This guy did not even pitch. I don't remember the last time he even threw 15 innings in a season.
But for $3, I don't care because I'm playing all upside. If he gets hurt, I toss him back because my other option is to get, Mike Fiers. I don't want
right.
I don't want Mike Fiers.
I agree with your premise for sure. I guess choosing which guy that we're going to take a chance on is the difference between me and you. I would have never even considered Rodon because the guy's so here's the thing though. What the point that is valid for sure. Early in the draft, it's, I think, a lot smarter to go with a guy that's consistent and that has shown talent, right? Even if it's even if it's not like the highest ceiling of talent in the middle rounds too, but in the late rounds, I would never suggest drafting a guy that's just mediocre, like with the ceiling that is never going to be great.
Right. Exactly. And that's what I think of Rodon is like this guy, he strikes out people. He gets a good amount of ground balls, and he's always been hurt. And I was thinking to myself, what if he's healthy this year?
So what if he's healthy, right? So
then I didn't think he'd have a 2.5 ERA. But I go, if I can get 150 strikeouts from him and he throws a 4 ERA, because with a 67, I haven't fine-tuned this thing, but you get about a 65 in this thing, you're looking at a guy with about a little over a 4 ERA. I just kind of, you glance at it. So I'm thinking, okay, if I can get a 4 ERA out of Carlos Rodon, maybe he picks up 7-8 wins, and he gets me 140, 150 strikeouts for $3. I wasn't like, I got Carlos Rodon, and I'm a genius because I knew he was going to, have a 2.5 ERA. No way. But using this formula, he had the potential to, obviously, and he did. And it's no guarantee, but that's why I took him. And saying all that about Carlos Rodon, be curious what he goes for next year, because if he's healthy and people bid him up to $20, I wouldn't bid on him because he's got risk. He walks a lot of people and he's hurt, so that.
Another pitcher that you had on your team, I think that is easily a lot of these guys that you did draft in AL only, they don't go back that far. Like Rodon, for example, isn't on either my 2020 list or my 2019 list, and I only used 30 innings pitched for the 20. He didn't do either of those years, so he's not on either list. I can't tell you what his career numbers are, but I can say that Rodon did not walk a lot of batters last year and is completely safe. from the walk problem if you're only just going by what we know, which is last season only.
Right. So I like a guy like Rodon, he didn't have the numbers of the last 2 years for either because of his injuries and the COVID. That's a guy I glance at his history, including his minor leaguers if you have to. And Fangraphs is kind of the source. It has it all right there for you. That's why I love it. I like sharing it because it's easy for people if they incline to want to try it. It's right there. It's easy to calculate. It takes some time, but it's easy. You don't have to have some. So, anyways,
okay. One thing about using these two statistics together that makes sense is that a guy that doesn't strike out a lot of batters, it doesn't mean like he's less flashy and he's like not going to be on top of everybody's draft board, but if he can keep the runners off the base path, which is what the goal of a pitcher is, really. A lot of times you'll see a guy can't strike out a lot of batters, but he has a great ground ball rate, right? So a guy like Framber Valdez, he actually has a decent strikeout rate, not bad. Let me try to find somebody else that just, you know what I mean? A guy that like maybe Dallas Keuchel. He is a ton of ground balls, but he doesn't hardly strike anybody out, so nobody's that excited about him. And vice versa. A lot of times when people don't get a lot of strikeouts, if they're going to be a decent pitcher, they better be getting a lot of ground balls. Same vice versa, right? So if you're not getting a lot of ground balls, you better be striking out a shitload of people like Dinelson Lamet or somebody, right?
Well, yeah, and this is why you have to do. I don't recommend just using I'm going to draft these guys in order based on the percent that they come up with. The highest goes first. The guy like Keuchel, he's a guy you have to look at it, and it goes back to the genesis of why I think like this is he gets a ton of ground balls, doesn't strike anyone out. To me, those guys are super susceptible to getting beat up because they don't get the strikeouts when they need the strikeout.
Plus, they really have to depend on their defense at that point. The ground ball,
right. You need a lot of double plays, and these guys don't strike out. When you need a strikeout with second and third and one out, these guys are not going to get it for you. And that's where the elite pitchers, they're able to curve an inning because they can get that key strikeout. They get they're more of the power pitchers. That's not to say that a guy like Kyle Hendricks has gotten away with it for a couple, 3 years, but he didn't have a great year this year. So these guys, all I'm saying is doesn't mean they're not good, but those are guys that I don't have on the same level as just because they have the same combined ratio. I would rather maybe go for a guy that has the more strikeout potential.
So interestingly enough, if you look back at Keuchel, you can see in 2019 he had a career season, no doubt about it, right? Nobody really believed in him going into 2020. I did draft him on a few teams. I wasn't expecting a lot out of him, but he had his ground ball plus strikeout rate was 78, okay? And he had a 60% ground ball rate and an 18.7 K rate. He was like, I'd say when your walk percentage gets to be about 8, you should better start paying attention because that is going to harm pitchers. And his walk rate was 8. But then in 2020, he didn't have a great season, but he didn't have a problem with walks. His walks were down to 6%. But he didn't make the 70%. He was 69-10. So he was like right on the cusp. It's the problem with him is that his strikeout percentage is not enough. And when you rely on the ground ball too much, you have to then rely on things that are out of sight of your control.
Right. So that's why anyone that is an outlier one way or the other, you have to look at him.
Let's talk about Kyle Hendricks for a minute.
Okay.
I'm sorry, but I still am a fan no matter what he does. I'm still a fan. In 2020, his ERA was 2.88. His FIP, though, was 3.5, which is a huge difference, really, if you think about it. So the 2.88 was totally lying to you. He did not reach 70 on the scale. And then in 2021, he started out the season horrible. Let me see what he did last year. I haven't even looked at him for this year yet. But tell me, I know that I would still draft Kyle Hendricks because I feel like he, even though he doesn't strike out a lot of batters, he's still consistent, which he will even out a pitcher that there's like so many of these pitchers that he will even them out. It's, let's say, a guy that, like Glass now, for instance, who has a huge ceiling, but you can't really rely on for jack shit.
Well, Glasnow is a guy that is super intriguing.
He did not even come close to making it, though, dude. He got a 59 on the scale.
Well, no. What was his ground ball rate this year?
43.
And what was his strikeout?
16.7.
Glasnow's was?
Oh, no. I'm talking about Kyle Hendricks. Glasnow crushed everybody, dude. Glasnow crushed everybody, dude.
Okay, so going back to Hendricks, he's a guy that is a perfect example. Is he's hittable, and he has to have everything go his way. And there's guys who have done that. I mean, Greg Maddux I think he's an 18% strikeout guy, and he's like a 50-something% ground ball rate. But the thing about Maddux, he never walked anyone, so that kind of brought him. He had complete control of everything he did. When you watch Maddux in his prime, you can throw the ball wherever you want, any pitch, any time. Hendricks is kind of like a poor man's Maddux, right? And
I don't know, dude.
They're risky. They're just riskier. I'd rather have a guy that has a 45 ground ball and a 25 strikeout, because I like the power pitchers to get out of jams.
Oh, that's mound presence. You can't really. How do you equate mound presence? Like, I wish there was a way to put numbers to it, but
I don't think there is. They talk all about it, but it really comes down to the numbers. Is, if you don't walk people and no one gets on base, you're going to be okay. If you let enough runners on and you don't strike anyone out, they're going to come around and score more than if you can throw the ball by people, all things equal.
In 2019, here's the situation. You have Luis Castillo with the highest number. He had 84 as per the formula, okay? The next guy on the list had 83.4. That was Glasnow. Glasnow is the only pitcher in baseball that had all five of these. When I did this spreadsheet, I pulled in ground ball percentage, strikeout percentage, walk rate, home runs per 9, FIP, and ERA, because I think FIP is important, because that's really when you're looking at what's not in the pitcher's control, or only what is in the pitcher's control.
Sure.
Glasnow is the only one with all five of those in the top, like 10% or 5%. No other pitcher. In fact, Luis Castillo walked so many batters in 2019. He had walked 10% of batters, even though he's ranked the highest in all of baseball with the formula. He still, when you walk that many batters, 10%, you have to then kind of take one away from the other categories, to me, because it kind of really has to even itself out somewhere. If you strike out 30% of batters and you walk 10% of batters, and ground ball rate is the other 55%, that's pretty much all it is. It's like the 3 true outcome pitcher. I just made that up.
Do you have Glasnow up on your thing?
Mm-hmm.
I'd be curious, when did he turn around his control?
I only went back to 2019.
Okay.
His walk rate was 6% in 2019. And then you look at 2020, I could tell you what his walk rate. 2020 is the worst because it's just throwing everything off. I don't have 3 full seasons to go by. His walk rate was it's highlighted pink, which is like the next step down from red, which is the worst. It's 9.2 for his walk rate in 2020. Now, a lot of these times, dude, this guy doesn't pitch a full season ever, so.
Right.
But this year, he had great numbers. He walked less than 8%, 7.9. His total for the formula that we're talking about was 81.5, which is great. It's in the top 8 Okay, he finished in the top 8 as far as ground ball plus strikeouts. So Framber Valdez finished the highest in your formula, dude. Framber Valdez in 2021. And we both know that he walks way too many batters. Him and McCullars both finished in the top 10 this year.
Right.
What does that mean going forward?
That he'll probably be more expensive in an auction next year or a draft than I'm willing to pay.
Right, for both of them.
That's
but what about a guy like Logan Webb who finished below Framber Valdez, but his strike or his walk rate is completely worth it. So yeah, Framber Valdez had
Webb's strikeout rate took a increase significantly this year.
Well, he's a rookie.
Right. Well, even from his minor league numbers, because when they're rookies, you kind of have to take in their minor league numbers. So a guy like that, I would say he has an elite ground ball pitcher.
60.7% ground balls for Logan Webb. Sorry.
Right. And then I'm just going to look up his history here, so bear with me, because this is a great example.
I will tell you another with Luis Castillo, who's still walking too many batters. He's just walking too many batters to ever be as good as he should be. So, now if Douglas would have looked at this and he would have been having a much better, for his argument, he would have been able to have a better basis. Like if he would have said, Luis Castillo, the reason I don't like him is because he walks too many batters, flat out. He's got huge velocity on his fastball, which is not really my favorite category. But whenever you're ready, go ahead. I'm just blabbing until you find it.
I was going to say, like, you look at Tyler Glasnow, he's a perfect example of this. He always was a ground ball pitcher. He's always a strikeout pitcher. His walk rate when he came up his first 2 or 3 years was like 15%. Once he got that walk under control, that walk rate under control, he's dominant. The guy is really unhittable when he's healthy.
Yeah.
He's like one of the best pitchers in baseball.
For sure, but the guy can't stay healthy. And obviously he was using sticky shit because immediately, dude, he got injured. And then he said straight up, he had to hold the ball too hard. Like when all of his muscles in his forearm were flexing as hard as they could, trying not to let the ball slide out of his hand, Then when you throw that hard and you don't have the sticky stuff anymore, then you have to grab it so tight. That's how he hurt himself.
So like Logan Webb, he's kind of always been up and down, but he's an average strikeout pitcher. He's a good control, and he's an elite ground ball pitcher. So his career average in the minors and majors is 23%. So he's right there. I would, as an average strikeout pitcher and an elite ground ball pitcher. So I think he's legit. And what could make him really good is if he can continue his strikeout ratio, increasing it just a couple 3%. He'd be a really good pitcher. Like really good.
So let's talk about a couple pitchers on the list that we've noticed. Okay, when we did this spreadsheet the other day, I said, what the hell is Alex Cobb doing on the list? Alex Cobb, this guy should not be on the list, I say. He says, oh, but maybe he should because he had a 78 according to the formula. We got to come up with a name for this thing because, I just because then I don't have to be like according to the formula. But here's the pitcher of the day. The guy that nobody would be sitting here thinking, okay, this is a sleeper, projecting a breakout from this guy. I don't know if nobody would say it, but it's kind of it wouldn't be in my top 5. And his name is Patrick Sandoval for the Angels. Finished with a 76.8 score, okay, on the formula. And does have a little problem with walks, I have to say. Alex Wood is also on this list, finishing right above Patrick Sandoval, and doesn't have a problem with walks, but then the problem comes from health, I guess. And Alcantara, we already know he's pretty good, but Sandoval's really the one that stood out to me like as the biggest, like, whoa, this guy is in the top 16
Now he's a guy next year. Now, because most people don't even know who he is. He's a guy next year that I might view it as a Carlos Rodon. I don't know if he'd go for that cheap in an American League only, but he's kind of got that same thing. He's kind of a little above league average on strikeouts and ground balls. He's 26, 25, 26 years old. He walks a few people, a few too many people. But he's a guy that I would look at. If I can get him $5, he's a guy that I'd go for. Now he might be terrible, right? But that's what I use this formula for. Of course, I'm not going to compare him to, DeGrom or Garrett Cole. I mean, but
no, we're just projecting breakout pitchers with this formula. That's what it's for.
Right,
it's not
right. So he's a guy. Alcantara is a classic guy in this model. And he was good this year, but
he's great. So let me ask you this. Alcantara, see, this is where the walks come in, because even though Pablo Sandoval or Patrick Sandoval, he finished really high. Okay. What is it? 77% or 77 total. Okay. You look at it, but the barrier here is only 70. You only need a guy to hit 70. So if you find a guy that has a score of, let's say, 71 or 72, but his walk rate is so much better than the guy that finished like with 78 or 80, you go with the guy with the least amount of walks, in my opinion. Because if you hit 70, that's the threshold. It's good enough.
Right. That's a good point.
So you have, like, I was going to bring up Pablo Lopez on here. Yeah, Pablo Lopez, he only has 74, while Patrick Sandoval has 77. But I'd rather have Lopez any day of the week because his walk rate is 3 percentage points lower, which is a big difference. I would say that's at least a walk per inning or per 9. It's at least 1 walk per 9 innings difference. I would choose Pablo Lopez, although I have to say, you also have to take into consideration the market value for these pitchers. Pablo Lopez is going to cost a lot more than Sandoval. Okay, so you have to take that into consideration too. So it's all about market value.
And a guy like, Pablo Lopez, I was talking to you earlier about, or texting you earlier about him, he's historically, you look at his minor league numbers, he's an elite ground ball pitcher. And he's young enough where you can see his strikeout rate is slowly getting better. And he's right there at league average. So he's a guy, as far as predicting a breakout, I wouldn't call him my Lance Mccullars breakout, but he's a guy that if he can just figure out to strike out a few more guys, he could be really good. He's a pretty good pitcher. He was hurt this year. But like Kevin Gausman is the classic guy, like Pablo Lopez. But Gausman was terrible in Baltimore, right? He's a terrible pitcher, and no one wanted him. He went around Cincinnati, Atlanta. He was awful. Then all of a sudden, he gets to the Giants, and he figured out a way. Everything was the same, his ground ball rate and everything, but he found out how to strike guys out for some reason. And that was my question in the Lou Blasi early in the year. And he was saying it's something about pitch selection and that, which makes sense. I don't get into it that much, but you can see his increased strikeouts drove him to be one of the top pitchers in the National League.
He didn't start striking. Well, I'll say this. In 2019, when he was still with Atlanta and Cincinnati, and his ERA was 5.72. His FIP was 385, which is better, but not like really great. His strikeout percentage was 25.3%. Then in 2020, his strikeout rate jumped from 25.3 to 31. And then this last year, it went back down to 29.3. But
good.
I believe that the strikeout percentage jump can be attributed to a couple things. Obviously, command, but velocity. His velocity jumped back up. So he lost some velocity in 2018 and 2019. His velocity was still down. 2020, back up really high. 95 miles an hour is his average fastball. Totally, hardly ever gives up any home runs, but never struggled with walks.
No,
Gausman
he's really good control. So he's a guy, and we all miss him. Like after the 19 season, he probably could have made the list, as like a potential, because his underlying stats are pretty good. But what happens is a guy like Gausman, for me, he's burned me so many years with just terrible.
We had high hopes for him, dude.
Yeah,
We
but then
really
he
did.
destroyed my team so many years, So that would have been a signal after 2019. He was striking out more people, and he had a good ground ball rate, and he had elite control. So looking back, it's not really a surprise, but we all were surprised, right?
We all missed it for sure. Yeah. So with Gausman, now I was going to bring up another pitcher on the list that it's interesting because God, what was I going to say? Pablo Lopez, another guy on the list is Shane Mcclanahan, who finished with a 73 score. His strikeout percentage is 27, which is really nice, and his ground ball is 45. That's where, I mean, would you rather have a guy with the lower ground ball and a higher strikeout rate, or because they kind of switch off? So either you're going to get a guy. A lot of times they don't have really good both.
I'd rather have the strikeouts if the ball base on balls is under control and the home run is under control.
So, okay, the home run is another thing that we should talk about a little bit. The home run is a problem too. Lance Mccullars is one of your favorite. Lance Mccullars ended up on your AL only team that you won this year in your league. Good, congratulations. Lance Mccullars, going into the season, you were huge on him. You liked him. Now, I could say this. Lance McCullers either developed this season a huge problem with walks. I don't think he had that when you were high on him as a projected candidate for a breakout. I'm going to look at 2020, what he did. I don't think his walk rate was a problem then. So, what happened?
He's never been an elite control pitcher. Put it that way.
Yeah,
I think his career, including the minors, is like 9.7%.
Okay, so he's always had a problem, and it actually got worse this year. So what's your feelings about McCullers next year? Now, he had a pretty good season this year. I mean, I think people now, he's on the radar, so you're not going to get him as any kind of sleeper. Are you going to draft him?
And keep in mind, I had to go get him last year. I spent $25 on McCullers in my AL league. And
you're crazy.
I was crazy until he's worth $25.
Well, first of all, he's never healthy, so no matter what his stats say,
right,
you can't spend that much money on him.
Well, I did.
Like Glass now.
That's how much conviction I had in him, and because I saw it. The one thing that's keeping McCullers from being really one of the best pitchers in baseball is his command. He strikes out enough guys. He's a ground ball pitcher. He knows how to get out of trouble. Throws a lot of double play balls, but he walks a lot of guys, and that's what's keeping him. So will I go after him next year? Sure. I think he is what he is now. I think he's probably going to go, over $20 if he's healthy.
But he walks over 11% of batters, and that's a problem.
But keep in mind, people you're playing against in your league aren't going to give a crap about that. So I think internally for my team, not so much if someone else wants to bid more for him, have at it. But to me, he walks too many guys, so I'm going to have a cap on him. I'll be happy to spend 20 on him if he's healthy.
You're going to spend 25?
I don't know. See, in an AL only league, it gets a little more pressing, right? When you're going.
Oh yes, for sure. It does make a big difference.
So,
yes.
In a mixed league, no, but only league, I'll keep him for 25. Let me put it that way.
Okay, that's probably, when you're dealing with only leagues, it does become there's a big difference there as far as how much you're going to spend on a player. I mean, we've already talked for an hour, so I know.
I was going to say, you're talking about a name, and in our mind, me and Joe D are the ones who came up and plotted this all out. And what really got started was, what really got us tuned in more was the Matt Boyd big meltdown in 2019 in the second half that cost us the league. And literally, he cost us the league because we couldn't drop him. We're in one of these leagues where it's hard to drop someone if they're not hurt.
Nobody was taking Matt Boyd in the second half, dude.
Right.
Okay?
And we got stuck with him. And so we started really looking at what the hell is going on with Matt Boyd. He was so good. And then you look at his numbers. He sucks. He's terrible. He doesn't throw many ground balls, and he doesn't strike out as many people as you'd think. He's like a 55. He will never be good until he stops throwing fly balls. And that's why he gives up home runs.
For 2019, I'm showing Matt Boyd with a 30% strikeout. Maybe that's why you drafted him. I think what happened to him in 2020, I don't know. But 2019, he gave up too many homers. That was his problem, dude.
How many what was his ground ball percent?
His ground ball was 35, and his strikeout was 30. His score was 65.8, so he didn't make the cut.
Right. But so my point there is, what did I say about a 65? It's probably like a 4.1, 4.2 ERA. He was first half. He was like 2.3.
4.56 ERA, dude. His FIP was 4.32. So
yeah, he was. So that's when I kind of go, this explains it. When I got more into it, I go, this guy throws too many home runs because he lets up too many fly balls. He doesn't get any ground outs. He gives up a ton of 3-run homers, and all of a sudden he could be cruising like this. Matt Boyd was the king of 4 shutout innings. You turn it off, you look back on your phone, and the score is 6-0.
One more player before we go, but I do think everybody should take a look at this formula for your fantasy drafts. And don't forget to get your league stats, because all the standings are going to disappear one of these days. And you're going to go in there, you're going to be like, I want to analyze the category stats and figure out what my goals are. They're going to be gone, and then you're going to be sad person. I was going to say sad boy, but first of all, we don't use gender anymore, pronouns. And second of all, it's not just men in baseball now, it's women too. So I should be a little more considerate of other people. Robbie Ray, though. So Robbie Ray, Lenny's always been a fan of Robbie Ray. Like, even though you know that Robbie Ray is going to be like mediocre at best, right? You're going to get lots of strikeouts. You know you're going to get a couple hundred innings from this guy. So in situations, he was like, Bauer was comparable to Robbie Ray before Bauer figured it out. But Robbie Ray has such ups and downs. So heading into the season, Lenny drafted Robbie Ray, and I'd be like, he's telling people, Robbie Ray got a new pitch, or he changed his mechanics or some shit. I don't believe that crap anyway. But so he went from walking 18.6% of batters in 2020 to whatever he did last year, which was a great improvement. He stopped walking batters 6.9%, but it went from 18% to 6.9%. His strikeout rate has always been good. Would you draft Robbie Ray going into next season, considering last year was really you could consider it a breakout season, even though he's old?
What's his strikeout rate?
So in 2019, he walked 11% and he struck out 31%. In 2020, he struck out, he struck out 27% and walked 18%. And last year, he struck out 32% and walked only 6.9%. He really improved.
Sandy Koufax kind of did the same thing. So I guess my question would be, I'd want to know what happened. Like, not that they'll tell you, but someone smarter than me or more knowledgeable than me, I'd want to know, is there an explanation for this?
He stopped walking batters. So, this year at one point, because I did have him and I was being greedy and like not very grateful for what he had done, since I didn't pay any money for him at all, hardly. I got him for free and what he was doing was excellent. But I did notice at one point that he was giving up a lot of home runs, and his home run rate is not good. And I don't think it's ever been good. It's like 1.5 home runs per 9. That's not good at all. But basically, I was thinking he just replaced his walk problem with home run now, but he's always had a problem with home runs. 1.5 is a lot.
What was his FIP?
His FIP in 2021, this last season.
Yeah.
I don't have FIP on that year, dude. I don't have FIP. Let me look it up. I'll look up FIP. But so, who do you like after looking at your list for this season? You like for, this is all based on market value. Okay, we're not saying like he's better than whoever. So who else do you like on there? I like Mcclanahan from Tampa Bay. He's a good one to look at for next.
Mcclanahan. I like Alcantara, Sandoval. Intrigued with Louis Castillo. He had a pretty good second half.
Oh, he's a good pitcher. There's no doubt.
After we beat him up. A guy I'm kind of in a National League only setting, Ranger Suarez kind of piques my interest.
For sure. How could he not pique your interest? He ranked 7 on the scale, dude. 7th.
Yeah, he's a ground ball pitcher. What made him really good this year is he was kind of a below strikeout percent pitcher throughout his minor league career, but he increased it by 10% in the majors, and he's up to like over 25, and he's got pretty good control. So, did they leave him in the rotation at the end of the year? I didn't follow him.
Yeah, he was in the rotation. He started out the season as an opener, like a middle relief guy. He was getting all kinds of wins as a reliever. And he might have got he had like 8 wins, and he stood out to me. I picked him up a couple times in Tout Wars. That was a head-to-head weekly league, points league. Another guy on this list, though, is Huascar Wainoa, Atlanta guy.
Yeah, he's on my list as well. Yeah.
So he's a good one to look at for next year if you're, if you don't feel like looking at this list. But
he's kind of like Suarez with a little more heat and kind of similar numbers, but he throws harder, gets a few more strikeouts.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
They say he's he's one of these guys on the list that start building, and because we don't have 5 Jacob deGroms and Max Scherzers on our roster, so these are the guys that win you the league. And all I try to do with this is narrow down the target, on guys that actually may have a better chance of doing it, rather than just taking Drew Smiley because he was good 10 years ago and you hope for a miracle. Right. Because that's what happens, right? People just, Drew Smiley was good. I remember when he was good, on some Cubs or whatever in 2015. Well, it's 2022 all of a sudden. And you want to stay away from those guys. I'd rather have Suarez than a guy like, obviously Matt Boyd or J.A. Happ. I'll take Happ. He could be good again.
Please not?
You don't want them. That's kind of what this list that I build in my mind, and I scratch it out. I use it for, I hope people use it. I don't use it, but I'm curious if people use it or want to tinker with it. I'm always trying to get a little edge and share it with whoever wants to listen to it and hear it.
Help us. We need help coming up with a name for this.
In my mind, it's the Matt Boyd list because he's the guy I should have weeded out using this list. Not that I'm bitter or anything.
You look at Kyle Gibson, and we would say, Douglas would say for sure that Kyle Gibson, he was comparing Kyle Gibson to Luis Castillo. Now, if you look at the statistics, even though that Kyle Gibson was not on a great team, he was pitching well. His ground ball rate is 50% every season. His strikeout rate is pretty bad, but he doesn't. I don't know. This past year, in 2021, his score was 72.6. He doesn't have a team right now, so he's a free agent. Another free agent, Jose Barrios, who I love, but he didn't quite make the 70. He got 68.9. I love Barrios. He hardly ever walks anybody. I think he'll be better in Toronto. I don't know.
A guy like Barrios is consistent across the board on ground balls and strikeouts. He doesn't fluctuate, so he's always going to be consistent. He's not going to be a 3.2 ERA guy over his career, but he's always going to be under 4. And that's okay. You can just write it down what he's going to do.
Dude, if he gets in the right ballpark, I think that Jose Barrios could reach the next level by striking out more batters than he does.
He could. Now, Kyle Gibson, the numbers show this. His career is like this. His seasons are like this. He was terrible in Philadelphia, if I recall, and he was really good in Texas for the first 3 months. But his career with Minnesota was up and down.
He was in Minnesota, yeah.
And because he doesn't strike anyone out, that keeps him. He's going to have good runs. He could have some good seasons. But when you're doing a risk evaluation, like how much do I want to spend on a guy? Well, I think you have to take into consideration this guy could be really bad. And he has been really bad.
Okay, but let me tell you this. Of my 3 seasons that I have here, I have 2019, 20, and 21. Kyle Gibson reached 70 every year, each of the 3 seasons. So this is why it's so important to pay attention to other factors. Because, I mean, if you looked at this and you say, okay, he makes the list every year. 73.8 in 2019. He had 70.8 in 2020. And then this year he reached 72. So right there. The problem is with him is he's had problems with walks and he doesn't strike out very many batters. But he always gets ground balls.
And what have been his ERAs over since 19, 20, and 21?
So in 2019, his ERA was 4.89, but his FIP was 4.26. In 2020, his ERA was the same, 5.39, but his FIP was 5.35, so he had a horrible year in 2020. Now, like I said, I didn't do his FIP or ERA for 2021. I just added those in when I decided to expand our thing, but
and I would suggest I'll bet anyone when you get these guys that are 70 or above, but their ERAs are terrible, there's a reason.
4.19.
And it jumps right out at you. It's because of walks and he's hittable.
No. I lied. 4.19 is what Steamer projects Kyle Gibson to be ERA next year. He actually had a 3.71 ERA this past season.
Yeah. But over his average ERA over the last 3 years is probably high 4s.
4.45.
Yeah. And the reason is he walks too many guys and he's a soft tosser who gets hit a lot. He's a ground ball hitter or a pitcher.
The ground ball is stable, about 51%.
Right. But you have to have the best pitchers have the combination.
Yeah.
So someone who has an 18 strikeout, that's like a Keuchel. He's like Dallas Keuchel. Keuchel's better, but for various reasons.
He got married to Kelly Nash from Quick Pitch.
Oh, is that, yeah?
These girls, they come to Quick Pitch, they find a husband in the major leagues, and then they leave. Pretty good idea.
So I'd be, we can work on this over the winter and come up with a list. And
we're going to, dude.
It's something fun. If someone else has stuff to add or someone wants to say they invented it, I'd be interested in talking to them and learning. I'm not
dude, nobody invented this. Can you not? Let's come up with a name for it. Let's but it is constantly changing, and we are trying to get it better. I mean, it's Malpal's creation. I'm now very intrigued by it because I never thought of looking at those things, but in reality, the pitcher's goal is to keep runners off the base paths, and with ground balls and strikeouts, there's a good chance you're going to do that. Now, then you have to factor in, because obviously those two stats don't consider home runs allowed. You could have a guy that, gives up 3 home runs per 9, and that's a horrible idea drafting him. So we got to find a way to get walks and home runs in there. But as of now, I think it's intriguing. And thanks for joining me tonight. I know Mitchell and Merrill are taking just some time off, and they'll be back, but the roundtable must go on. So
All right. Thanks. Have a
thank
good
you,
night.
Malpal.
Okay. Bye.
Adios.